Modern Quilt Guild has taken, they're much more savvy. The modern quilters are much more savvy about copyright and about ways to monetize their information. And there's been, and it's kind of swinging back and forth, the pendulum, like people, there's, you know, there are modern quilters that are like, I own the hexie. Like, that's mine.
Right.
And if you want to use it, you got to pay me.
Right.
But the quilting tradition is, who knows? I mean, Barbara Brackman, she would be an interesting person.
Yeah, we interviewed her. It was really interesting. Yeah. Yes. Barbara Brackman, for those that don't know. She put it, so those that don't know Barbara Brackman, she put together an encyclopedia of piecing and also an encyclopedia of applique that helps us understand the history of quilting in a really practical way.
Yeah, and she's a Civil War quilt expert, and it's a really awesome blog. And anyway, she would know the origin of the hexie.
Right. And
that person's probably dead, right? And
well,
so
and it's a
who
shape,
owns it?
Right? And it's a shape. You can't own a shape. You can't own a circle or a square or a triangle. These are just common things that we all get to use. So the question is, at what point does it become protectable? And it's kind of on a spectrum of protectability. But the shape of a hexagon, not protectable. So, yeah, I mean, that's really interesting, right? So more savvy, more aware of copyright. And then the question is there over claiming? And when does that happen? Which is kind of interesting, too, in that space.
It is. It's say you take a workshop with me, and then you make a quilt, and then you show it in an exhibition. Now, do you need my permission? I say no, but should you acknowledge that you learned from me and that quilt came out of that experience? I say yes, I say I'm a copy leftist.
Yeah.
And there are other people out there that are like me, but then, you know, I've always sort of said that, but now that I'm walking through a quilt show and I see people that I know worked with me and they're not acknowledging having had that experience, that feels weird.
Yeah.
And it's really, it's been hard for me to reconcile that information in my head.
Right.
You can't be sharing stuff in an educational setting and then expect people not to do anything with it.
Right.
But
it's an interesting thing, right? There's an implied license that you're taking a class to make it. So there's an implied license that you're allowed to make a version of it. So then the question is, what can you do with that? And sort of, it's a very interesting space that's very different from other areas of copyright. One thing I was looking through the recent Paducah quilt. They had, their catalog of the quilts that they create that were in the show. And they had the name of the person and the title of it, but they didn't have the other information. But you could see and you didn't have to be that knowledgeable to know that they had used patterns and they had used other things, but that wasn't included in the show catalog, which I found really interesting because it seems like it's just about transparency, right? Inspired by X or patterned by X. That we're trying to understand that it's just about attribution. And giving credit where you should give credit. And I don't think it's clear. I think it's getting more clear, but I don't think it's clear when you're supposed to do that. And even in this catalog, they didn't include the originating pattern, which I thought was interesting.
Well, that's a really interesting question. Because when I was at QuiltCon this past February, and I'm kind of cruising around looking at the exhibit, and I was with another friend, and this friend and I were talking about this, and there were people that clearly had studied with a particular teacher and their work was derivative, but there was no acknowledgement of that studying. And then I had a conversation, I was teaching a workshop and I had a conversation with another student, and she said, in the paperwork, you acknowledge your source information, but in your artist statement, which is what's going to be publicly viewed, you do not have to.
Very interesting, right? So they have the data, but they're just not sharing it. And, my feeling is like, including the data isn't about like right and wrong. It's about transparency and knowledge. Like if I see something and I go, wow, I love that. I want to make that. If I knew that it was from your book or from something else, it takes me to where I need to go. But if it just has the person's name, there's no way for me to be able to track down where that, I mean, there is, right? But it's a lot harder. So I think it helps the quilt industry enormously to have the attribution, because it encourages people to buy and do more things, you know? So,
yeah, it's just part of the dissemination of information, which is positive. Yeah. But a lot of times, there's two things going on with the quilt maker. One, the fact that there's a stigma in admitting that you gained that information from a workshop, or that it isn't your own original information. That it's actually, I tell my students that it's a filtering system. Like I give you this information and it filters through you, and then what comes out is this sort of combination of the knowledge I gave you and your own personal identity. But if you fear that your voice isn't strong enough, you don't want to give any indication that you've studied with someone else. Yeah. And then the second thing is that a lot of times people don't even, like, they think it's their original work. Like they don't put two and two together. 2 years ago, you had a workshop with me, but now you're making this quilt. This looks a lot like the work I make, but you're making it at home in your studio, and you don't see the connection.
Right. In music, I mean, in copyright, we call that subconscious copying. And if you're in music industry, you can get sued and lose. I mean, you could actually be sued, and the suit be successful because you didn't realize that, you know, there's a super popular song, you don't remember it, but you include it into your music. You can get sued and, you know, have to pay damages too, even though you didn't mean to. So it's interesting. It's just a different, you know, it's a
right.
Thing,
I think like sampling, like in music. Yeah. People sample other people's work, and I think of myself as a sampler with what I do. I mean, because my work is totally grounded in traditional quilt making, and I'm always referencing the traditional quilt block. Yeah. And it's anyway, it's all fun stuff to think about, isn't it?
So interesting. Yeah. I would love to have conversation, and maybe sometime have conversations with a bunch of you together. It'd be really interesting to see what comes up if we have, you know, 2 or 3 people chatting about the same topic. I think that would be really interesting. Okay. Yeah. So my last question is, on your book list, you include Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own. I'm curious why. And I keep saying that quilters, I keep using that reference to quilters because we're really good about taking up space. Like women obviously often don't, but because of sort of the nature of quilting, we do take over spare rooms and other rooms and feel entitled to it and don't feel guilty about it and just do it, which is really different than in other instances. So I'm curious tell me why you included Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own on your book list.
Because I think one of the things that hinders the maker is that if you've got to set your stuff up and then take it back down, and if your family somehow thinks that's what you should do, if you are constantly setting up and taking down, you're less likely to be making. And that claiming a space that's yours, that is your maker space, empowers you to be able to make all the time, continuously, and it's great to have your own creative space that's designated as your space for making. And I just advocate for that.
Awesome. Well, this is so much fun. Let's find time to chat again. And if you can think of others that you think I should be talking to, would you email me or introduce me to them? Because we're at this next phase of it, of kind of going deeper, and I would love to chat more and play. It's just awesome. It was a great hour.
Yes, I totally agree, Elizabeth. We will be in touch.
Okay, fabulous. All right, have a great day.
You too. Enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye.
Right, bye. So this is Elizabeth Townsend-Gard. You've been listening to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School. We want to hear from you. Join our army, our quilting army. Go to our Facebook page. Suggest people to be interviewed. Suggest yourself to be interviewed. We are excited to hear from you. But most importantly, I hope you get a chance to quilt today.